when people are disenfranchised, they go to third parties. When candidates are disenfranchised, they go to third parties. And I always have mixed feelings because disenfranchised people who don't feel like they're represented by the current system are 100% of our movement. Those are our people. I think that Andrew Yang and Catherine Gale and Rob Ritchie and a number of the leaders right now in the ranked choice voting space are coming from a similar perspective of where I was, where they get excited about this potential, don't really dig into the nitty-gritty details. And then by the time they do, they've actually already got a sunk cost. Rob Ritchie is the executive director of Fair Vote's been doing this for 30 years. Catherine Gale is pretty new to the space, and she was, I don't think, had ever heard much about star voting until we were on the Nerds for Humanity podcast together. And she actually was like, I really like this. I think I might like it more than ranked choice, maybe. And I don't want to misquote her. That's a total paraphrase. But she seemed open-minded. She was definitely supportive and asked me to follow up later. So hoping to do that with her. But her big passion is the Final Five primary. And star voting combined with the Final Five would be rad for when we do need a primary. So I think in that case, it might be a yes and. For Andrew Yang, my concern is that he has this sunk cost as well as a political incentive to stick with ranked choice voting. So during his presidential campaign, a lot of the Yang Gang were like, hey, we're all about math, we're all about the science, check out star voting. Yang Gang was falling in love with star voting left and right every day. People were joining up, and he was bringing them to the question in the first place about voting methods. And then they were finding star voting and getting excited because that's kind of his whole demographic, is people who want to dig into the science. But he had already publicly taken an opinion. He had put it on his campaign platform. And that means that he's got an issue if he wants to change positions midway. And then as soon as he finished his presidential campaign, he launched into running for mayor of New York City. New York City had just adopted ranked choice and was about to have him run for mayor using ranked choice voting. And that election, in many ways, was a train wreck. It really exhibited exhausted ballots, voter confusion, election officiation snafus and confusion, the whole 9 yards. But Andrew Yang rightfully made a point of being really supportive of alternative voting throughout his campaign there and not undermining the validity of the election, which I think was important for him to do, especially as a loser. As the candidate who lost, not to say that he is a loser, sorry, that came out wrong. But I think he took the high road and was supportive of ranked choice in that context. And I think that's really important for him to have done. Historically, places that have repealed ranked choice voting have gone back to first past the post plurality every single time. And if we are gonna point out the issues with ranked choice, I think it's really important that we lead with a solution and say, it's not that we're trying to repeal voting reform. We're not anti-voting reform. Plurality voting in terms of outcomes and strategic incentives is empirically by far the worst. But in terms of a movement, that's where we really get strategic. And so I'm assuming that his new book includes a whole lot of ranked choice voting promotion. It came out yesterday, but I think he's digging himself in a hole where it's going to become very difficult for him to accept new information or to publicly change his mind. So that's my fear. Ranked choice voting technically means anything with the ranked ballot. And star voting actually counts the votes using the preferences. So it's still a preference voting method, just like all the other ranked choice methods. It's really a hybrid of a ranked and a rated method, because the first round, you're counting the scores. That's basic rating. The second round, you're counting the number of voters who preferred each finalist. But there are a lot of different ways to count a ranked ballot. There's some great YouTube videos that will make your head spin on all the different ways and the pros and cons. But I think a simple message to Andrew Yang and anyone else who's a supporter of ranked choice voting is that the voting method should count all the data that voters put down. So whatever your ballot data is, count it all. Don't arbitrarily throw away some of it, all of it, any of it. And that's step one of what the Equal Vote requires. Our organization is the Equal Vote Coalition. And what that means is that any way I cast my ballot, you should be able to cast an equal and opposite vote. If the election was tied, I voted, I have really strong, nuanced opinions, you should be able to cast an equal and opposite ballot to bring it back to tied. No matter how many candidates are on my side, no matter how many are on your side, that should be at least possible. And there's two things that are required to make that happen. Number one is you need to be able to weigh in on every candidate, whether it be as simple as approval, where you can approve all the candidates that are good and not approve all the candidates who aren't. Or with ranked choice, in order to do that, there needs to not be a limit to the number of candidates who can be ranked. You need to be able to weigh in on every candidate. And then the second criteria is that you need to be able to show equal support. If I have a clear majority and there's only one candidate on my side, then I'm definitely going to win. But if I have two candidates who are like equally awesome, my faction's going to be divided between those two and end up divided and conquered. Unless we can say, I prefer both of these guys or gals over, Darth Vader over there. So the ability to give equal rankings is really important, or ratings, depending on the voting method. And those two things together are pretty much the foundation of the equal vote criterion for single winner methods. And it's a pass-fail mathematical axiom where we really promote it as like the minimum bar. There's a lot of voting methods. Most voting methods pass this metric. It's not a cherry-picked criterion that only my method can pass. It's just a basic foundation for what is a fair and equal voting method. It's encoded directly in our founding documents. One person, one vote means that as near as is practicable, the weight and worth of every citizen's vote should be equal. And I think I might have got that quote spot on, or it might be slightly paraphrased, but that was from a Supreme Court ruling in a Voting Rights Act case from the 60s, I think.
Westbury versus Sanders, 1964.
Thank you. Yeah, this is why I have you around. This is why I need you around. So an equally weighted vote is just that. Any way you vote, I should be able to bring the election back to tied.